Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Welcome to it, midweek editions here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. As we're already through a Wednesday of the bye week. It's not felt like one just because of all the drama and news and speculation. We have Urban, not as a guest. Next best thing, though, Urban's podcast with our dear friend Tim May. Some comments on candidates and a direct question and answer from one Urban Meyer about Nebraska. We'll have that coming up. We'll spend time with Mr. Husker Football, Mike Babcock, as we'll go over the week that's been. Really, September is one of the shorter months, and it's kind of flying, but it's also a bit of a standstill. It's weird to have a bye this soon. But you need it. You as a fan and your liver, God love you, need it. And we'll spend a little bit more time here on what's ahead for Nebraska with 8 games left. What's realistic, what's doable, what dare we say maybe a cold reality with this football team. Can join us today. Get your emails in 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825 5865. Can email Chris at HailVarsity.com and give us a find on Twitter at Schmidt_radio. Chris Schmidt, that's me. And then you have Elijah Herbel at Herbal Essence for his Twitter handle. Can watch us. We're streaming here on ESPN Lincoln's Facebook, on ESPN Lincoln's Twitter, and on the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed at HVarsity Radio.
And Schmidt, before we dive too deeply into actually important topics here, have you actually thought about what you're going to do with an off weekend? It's the first one of these we've had in a while, it feels like, and we're still going to go with the Saturday morning edition. But
we are.
After that, you still have a whole Saturday ahead of you. Have you actually thought about what you're going to do?
I'm locked in. Me and Iowa Russ are golfing.
Oh, good choice. The weather's going to be beautiful on Saturday.
Here's the thing, and I have cursed Friday night college football for a while, but now I'm like, you know what? During the pandemic, we had a lot of fall golf. Okay, and it was incredible. Great temperatures, wonderful colors, right? Just scenic and beautiful and very, very comfortable. And you had minimal football. Or you didn't start football till, I think, October 30th, right? Nebraska, Ohio State. And then you went to December. It was an abbreviated season, so you got September and October to go play golf. Like one small, I'm underlining small here, perk of the pandemic, right? You got to look at the glass or beer being half full, even in that situation. But no, I mean, Saturday's a bye week, so it's time to go lose money to Iowa Russ on the golf course. And then that Saturday, weather permitting, you'll do Rutgers Friday night. I'll have another Saturday to watch college football on my phone and go try and find my 3-wood.
See, I'm thinking, I'm trying to find a group of people that are willing to drive up to Council Bluffs with me and go park ourselves in a sports book all afternoon for college football. Because I haven't gotten a true afternoon of just watching college football all season long. I try to stay updated with what I can. I think you're in the same boat here, Schmitty. But with our focus first and foremost being Nebraska, that takes our focus probably 3 hours before kickoff up until kickoff through the game, and then at least 2 to 2.5 hours post-game, where that kind of wipes out most of your Saturday. You don't get a chance to watch all that much college football, barring, an 11 a.m. kickoff, you get to watch the nightcaps.
You do. Here's the other thing, and this is not nice to say, but Nebraska and Indiana, they're a night game. Do we know what time Iowa State, Kansas play? Right? Because I think Iowa State, Kansas are in 2 weeks. I think they are that October 1st game in the Big 12, aren't they?
It's October 1st at 2:30 p.m.
So, you're not going to be able to make it from from Lawrence to Lincoln in time.
Unless you leave at halftime of the Iowa State-Kansas game, but based on how those
should we do two? Should we do two pregame? Should we do a pregame in Lawrence? I can make that happen.
That'd be really fun. Previewing who could be two of the top candidates for the Husker coaching job.
Well, I think that's going to be a sweet game if they're both undefeated.
Well, we could do a split pregame show where you could be in Lawrence, I could be in Lincoln, or vice versa.
Well, what I want to do is let's do a pregame in Lawrence and then do a pre-Nebraska-Indiana game at Gary Michael's tailgate.
Oh, hit the roadie? Hit a midday roadie back to Lincoln?
Yeah. It'd be fun.
That'd be a lot
I'm going to work on it.
That'd be a lot of fun.
Because I'm thinking about punting Purdue. I'm not sure as hell not driving to West Lafayette now. Let's get into this, okay? Mike Babcock's in 15 minutes, Evan Bland at 5. Okay, so what do we think of the remaining part of the season? 8 games. They're going back to work, fundamentals. Told you FPI says 2-10's Nebraska's number. Where are you at as a Nebraska fan? Do you think it's another, at best, 2-win season? Do they have one more in them? Do they have a 3-9 written on their forehead? Is it 4-8? Can they get to 5-7? As it looks right now, who can they beat? Well, as it looks right now, nobody on the lines of scrimmage. I mean, Illinois is too physical based on the eye test early season. Indiana, their back seven's pretty good.
And they look fairly physical up front as well.
And I know they're unbeaten. They haven't beaten anybody worth a darn, but they're good defensively, right? And Nebraska's defense isn't stopping anybody. They're going to be Indiana's physical. Nebraska on most power ratings right now, they're the 14th ranked team in the Big Ten, and they're 1-3. So does Nebraska creep to around 500? I think that's dreaming. But I think if that happens, that's a remarkable coaching job. I think it's an absolutely remarkable coaching job by Mickey. I know as a Nebraska fan, you don't want to stare down the barrel again of a 3-9 or worse, or a sub 500 season, but that's what the bookies are looking at. That's what the numbers are staring at right now. And it's the current staff's job to coach the kids up. I think they're going to play hard and do well as far as trying to prepare. And that's why you make a move, as unpleasant as it feels for many pro-Chenander folks out there. But Bill Busch and his attention to detail can help this defense. If the defense is going to get better, where they're not springing leaks on every level, it's going to start this week, and then they got to carry it over to Indiana. I think the reality of a 2-10 is very real. Much like we talked Northwestern, that's your coin flip. That is your momentum killer or deliverer. If you don't get Indiana, I think it could absolutely be a tailspin for the rest of the season if you don't get Indiana.
I'd go as far as to say, if you don't get Indiana, even right now looking at the schedule, I think 1-11 could be more likely than 5-7. Because to get to 5-7, you need to sweep.
Okay, you're telling me
you need to sweep October most likely if you want to get to 5-7.
So we're talking 3 or 4.
Talking 3 or 4. Yeah, because Indiana, Rutgers, Purdue, Illinois, those are probably the 4 games on your schedule, or you go, you know what? Maybe Nebraska's got a shot if they can make some significant bye-week adjustments. Because you look at Minnesota's going to kill Nebraska on the lines of scrimmage based on what I've seen from them so far. Michigan's going to kill Nebraska on the lines of scrimmage. Wisconsin's definitely going to kill Nebraska on the lines of scrimmage.
Right November off.
And then Iowa, like, we joke about their offense. We've joked about it for a couple weeks now, but man, Nebraska, if they couldn't move the ball in Oklahoma, they might not get a first down against Iowa. And I'm being a little exaggeratory.
We are jumping to conclusions here during the bye week of worst case scenario. But we're trying to be very real with where this football team's at, the transition that's here, and what their talent level's like. It's not just talent level, but it's confidence. I mean, confidence is as much as anything. Who's with us on the horn?
We got Chris on the horn.
Chris, thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Hey, guys, did you see what Ibrahim did in the first quarter last week for Minnesota?
Against Colorado?
Yeah.
It was actually on replay on Big Ten Network last night, and I caught it at the bowling alley, so yes.
Yeah, 100 yards, 3 touchdowns first quarter.
Yep.
That translates to, well, probably more against Nebraska.
You're saying Melvin Gordon output?
Yeah. He rushed for 180 in the first half, and then they started bringing in their second stringers or whatever. And don't forget, it was their fourth or fifth string back that got like 130 against us last year. So
yeah, they do a great job of developing the running back room in Minnesota. I will say that.
So does Wisconsin, and I mean, they were on their fourth string last year too when they clubbed us like a baby seal. But I don't know. I mean, Indiana's got a far better win on their schedule than we do.
Mm-hmm.
We got to admit that. Illinois is a far better team than North Dakota, and Illinois is going to club us. Man, he's building a little Wisconsin there.
He is. His lines are brutal. They're really physical.
I wouldn't be shocked at a 1-win season. I'd be a little surprised, but I wouldn't be shocked. I think 3 wins is about our best hope.
Yep.
So
that's pretty realistic.
I mean, I don't see, and it's not because we don't out-talent these guys. We do. If recruiting means anything, then we out-talent everybody in the West. But we know that coaching is far more important. We just haven't had the coaching. And we got to get back to getting coaches that, take it seriously and don't play flag football. And, that's just, I guess there's a reason why they don't let guys into the practice. When there's all this secrecy, it's because they don't do something.
I don't know that that's the case, but it just clearly there's a way to go about practicing and developing. Chris, thanks for the phone call, bud. Appreciate you listening. Yeah, Riley had open practices, and 2017 was no peach to watch it all. So it is what it is. It comes down to development and can you get guys ready? And I'll say this. You're going to have time with Bill Bush on that side of the ball. You're going to have time with what Mickey wants done, and we'll see what their vision is, and we'll see what they can produce in a short amount of time. But you can get guys better. I know this. I know Ron Brown took over the running back department the final part of the season last year, and you saw more of a refined rotation. You saw a better run game. I was rewatching Oklahoma last night just because it's a different view from the press box to the Fox broadcast. And you know who was really fun to watch, and I know it was kind of garbage time, but, man, he was itching to get out. Gabe Irvin looked money. And I know A.J. Allen's looked fantastic, but good for Gabe Irvin. As hard and as passionate as he ran. He looked quick. He looked decisive. He looked trustworthy with his knee. So if Nebraska can figure out something run-wise, they still have some options to do that. I also like, and I'm not making a quarterback controversy here, I like Chubba's mobility. I like Chubba and his ability to run or scramble, right? And he's a little more sturdy, a little bigger dude than what you have in Thompson. Casey's done nothing wrong except play behind a tough offensive line. But Chubba, again, context important, but Chubba's something to look at, to think about here moving forward, or even Smothers here. If Nebraska's best chance on offense is to slow it down and hold the football, you're going to need quarterback run element in this offense.
And to get back to your point about Anthony Grant here for just a second, I was thinking about this yesterday. I didn't get a chance to bring it up, but just to represent where Nebraska's at this season, any other season yesterday, we would have spent the majority of the time talking about the A.J. Allen injury and what Anthony Grant can do to come back. We would have asked probably every guest we had yesterday about that injury and what Gabe Irvin brings, what we saw from Gabe Irvin at the end of the Oklahoma game. That's what we've been talking about in a normal season, but this season's just at the point now where I mean, A.J. Allen has almost been an afterthought here on the show. I mean, it sounds like it's a collarbone injury, and it sounds like he's confident he's going to be able to come back just fine, and you get a lot of guys coming back from collarbone injuries just fine. But, again, that's what we would have been talking about yesterday. We probably would have spent a good majority of the day today as well talking about that, because that's the news story, what's happening on the field. But Nebraska's at a point where the talking points are not what's happening on the field. And I don't want to say people are checked out of what's happening on the field, because every game's still important, and I'm sure by Saturday, I guess a week from Saturday, I'll be geared up for Indiana, and we'll be ready to watch that and talk about that. But it's not quite normal, this media cycle, because Monday through Thursday, the opponent that's coming on Saturday isn't top of mind.
No, it's what's going on off the field What's Nebraska doing now in transition? That's what's been all too familiar with Nebraska the last 20 years, right?
And I mean, in another season, if I would have come on the air and said, you know what, I think 1-11 is more likely than 5-7, the phones would be ringing off the hook. But we've had one call. That's just kind of the state that Husker Nation's in right now.
I still think we got to figure out a way to Lawrence on October 1st for a pregame, and then we get back here for another pregame ahead of the 6:30 kick on BTN.
It would work.
I mean, the Trev Bowl, Iowa State, KU, assuming they're both undefeated, it'd be all right. It'd be all right. Our old dear friend Rock Westfall chimes in. He says, one name not getting much traction is Bert, the pig farmer. I love that Bielema has those two names, and they're accurate. He looks kind of like Bert. He looks like an adult Beavis, a little bit. And listen, if he ever hears me say this, he'll probably spike me. He knows the old DNA from his Wisconsin days, expert on the division, in style Nebraska must play. He gets results. Illinois could be the Kansas of the Big Ten this year. Illinois was so close to a bowl game last year. Whatever you think of Lovey had tough football players, good lines of scrimmage, and Bielema enhanced that. They'll get to a bowl game this year. They could. Mike Babcock's on the way with Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity. We're presented by Currency. We'll check in with Mike Babcock in just a minute. Few comments. Can watch us here on Hail Varsity's Twitter feed, Hail Varsity Radio at HVarsity Radio. Also, ESPN Lincoln Twitter feed and ESPN Lincoln Facebook. So check that out if you want. Vic checks in from Denver. He says, you don't want to spend Saturday in West Lafayette, Indiana. I had that thing circled to go to originally because it was supposed to be Nebraska, Michigan, October 15th. They moved October 15th's game into November, i.e. Michigan on the road to start your November. They flipped Purdue around, and it could have been, coulda, woulda, shoulda, right, as you pick some early ball games. You project. Ireland was huge, incredible experience. We're still doing Black Friday in Iowa City, but from a West Lafayette standpoint, Purdue's 1-2, Nebraska's 1-3. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. We'll get to some more comments here. Can take your phone calls as well. What is your outlook? What's your win total look like moving forward here for Nebraska with 8 games remaining? Chris at HailVarsity.com or 466-3776. Mike Babcock with us, Mr. Husker Football at MD Babs on Twitter. And Mike, a tough weekend for Nebraska, not only the Oklahoma outcome, but also moving on from Coach Chinander. It just kind of seems like a tough cycle Nebraska can't get out of. Head coach, coordinators, and disarray right now. Tough job for Mickey and company.
Yeah, I guess the one positive is that he's got the off week to try to do some things. But you know, we've talked about this before. But you know, you come in, you're the interim head coach. You're playing Oklahoma at the time, number 6 team in the country. They're as good as advertised, I think. Mm-hmm. You have a tough time there, so then people are skeptical. You come out of that, you release your defensive coordinator, who I think just about anybody that covered the beat would say that he was a good guy. You know, you really hated to see it, but you could understand, given the yardage that the Huskers had given up. But it's kind of the same thing, you know. You've already gone into the season 4 games, and you know now you're making another change. An interim head coach and a new defensive coordinator. I'm a Bill Bush guy, so I think you know he can get the job done, but it's on a very tight schedule from a time standpoint. So we'll have to see how that goes. But it's the one good thing, I guess, is the off week, and I think that was probably taken into consideration when the changes were made.
What's been your impression of Mickey so far? That's a monster week to have to juggle from an emotional standpoint and then a prep standpoint, and then your opponent, and then you also make the move on chins. So far, what do you think of the job Mickey's done?
Well, I'm a Mickey Joseph supporter. I think I said before I'd like to see the interim dropped at some point. But I think he's handled things well. He's a tough-minded guy. I remember when he came here, he one of the things he said was, "You got to win." That's the bottom line. Because people were talking about, well, you're a former Husker, you're coming home, all this stuff, and he's like, yeah, it's all great, but got to win. That's the, and that's the thing that I think he'll do what it takes to get the job done as best he knows how, and we'll see how it goes. But he's very tough-minded, and I think he relates to his players very well. I think he relates to the media pretty well. He has a little bit of what comes across as a sense of humor, and in this time and situation, there's not much room for humor.
Mike, I got a text from my Uncle John last night, and it essentially said Mickey Joseph right now probably has the toughest job in America in terms of coming in to being an interim head coach for this Husker football team. And it's one thing if you're an interim head coach that steps into a team that's close, that kind of team that's 5-7, 4-8, and they're just trying to make a bowl game. But this team, as Schmidt and I were talking about in the first segment, looks a lot closer to 1-11 than 5-7 or 6-6. So, I mean, how far away is this, Husker football team? What do you think Mickey Joseph is going to have to do, not in terms of X's and O's and on the field, but what is he going to have to do just with the team as a whole in order to get them to a point where they're at least competitive in more games than not down the stretch?
Yeah, I think it's his leadership, his mentality, that basically we're going to get the guys on the field that want to get the job done. We're going to compete this week and see who steps up. And like I said, he understands it's about winning. That's what you have to do. And I think he'll do the things that he can to try to accomplish that. But again, it's a considerable task, and I think your grandfather got it right from that standpoint. It's really a difficult situation. The other thing that I liked that Mickey said after the game was, that we're going to do things the right way. We're going to treat it as if we're going to be here, and if we aren't, we'll still have done things the right way, and that involves recruiting as well as coaching. So I think, you might look at that as kind of an empty statement, but I didn't. I thought that was pretty substantial. I thought it was important for him to point that out, and I think that'll be his approach. Now, how that translates into wins and losses, I don't know. I'm kind of with you guys. I don't think that it's potentially a bowl situation here, but you never know. Let's see what happens against Indiana. Let's go one game at a time, because if you can play well against Indiana, there are teams on the schedule yet that you've got a shot at. I think if you can get things together, get the pieces together, and get everybody pulling in the same direction.
Mike, as you've covered Nebraska football, how turbulent has this season been? Does it have similarities to you to 07 and 17? And I guess I ask, is this as bad as you've seen it? And that's not a shot at Mickey, that's not a shot at Bush or Trev, it's just what is. You have how things got started this year, and you have a dismissal and another dismissal. There's been coaching changes, but not at this point. And I don't question. I think Trev made the right call, okay? And I think Mickey made the right call, and that sucks to say because, again, we all like chins.
Yes.
But from a standpoint of just eye test right now, you've seen a lot of teams have tough years in the last 15 years.
Yeah, that's true. And, the examples that you give, no, I don't think they were near the turmoil that we see now. I think that, it's just, here's the bottom line. You got to start somewhere. You got to do something. And I think that you have the athletic director that will do it, because you've seen Trev Alberts make the difficult decisions in the past. How difficult was it to remove football and wrestling at Nebraska, Omaha, at Omaha University. He made the tough decisions. He wasn't real popular for making those, but they turned out to be the right decisions. And he's done the same kinds of things at Nebraska, I think. Couldn't have been an easy decision to get rid of Scott Frost. It couldn't have been an easy decision for Mickey to get rid of Chins, and they had to have some support from the athletic director on that. I haven't seen anything like this. You'd have to go back to probably the Bill Jennings era, and even then, I don't know if it was quite where it is right now.
Mike, the thought is, all right, if you've been a successful program in the past, you have a chance to be successful in the future. You've had Bama, you've had Oklahoma, you've had Florida, you've had Penn State, Texas, SC. Go through the list. Miami. They've all had down years. They've all had transition, turnover, turmoil. They've crawled back to some degree. Is there a real fear, though, that Nebraska is on the brink of becoming something they've always not been, and that's just kind of an afterthought on the college football landscape?
Well, we've been saying this now for a while, that
right.
Nebraska's going to get
just
back.
One coach away.
Yeah, it hasn't happened. So, the longer it goes, the more concerned you have to be about it. But again, like I said, you got to start somewhere. From the bottom up, and hopefully Nebraska has bottomed out, and the only way is up. Certainly, you would look at it and say that that's the case.
Mike, with about our last 90 seconds, maybe about 2 minutes, I want you to quickly just give your take on how long this next coach at Nebraska is going to have to get things back, and maybe describe what back means to you as well. But Scott Frost got a little over 4 years, and we said at the start this is a 4 or 5 year project, and after 4 or 5 years, we all saw what was going down with this Husker football team. The next coach, though, how much time is he going to get this thing right?
I think we're looking at the same kind of a thing, 4 or 5 years, because you're looking at the recruiting period, that you bring in guys your first year, and how do those guys develop and so forth, how do they fit into the program down the line. I think it's going to be no different from that standpoint, but when you get in that kind of rotation, 4 or 5 years, new coach, 4 or 5 years, new coach, you have to make so many changes that it's difficult to get back to where you need to get. And so I hope that you would look at it and say, we can do it now. You've got to win. That's the thing. We were looking at last season. Oh, look how close the games were. Yeah, but the bottom line was they didn't win, and that's where they're at right now. So I think it'll be the same kind of a thing, but it's a different time, and recruiting is a different situation. NIL is different. Transfer portal is different. There are so many things that you have to take into account, but you got to start somewhere.
Well, Nebraska has always just been chasing. They've never had a moment to stop, be solid, and then build off of some success. It's always been constant turnover somehow, some way. So we'll see if that cycle ends up breaking. Mike Babcock with us from Hale Varsity at MD Babs on Twitter. Mike, thanks for a few minutes today. Always wonderful to chat with you, and we'll turn our attention to IU next week, all right?
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Appreciate you. Mike Babcock with us, and always love chatting with Babbers. We'll dive into that, topic of your one more mishire away from oblivion. I mean, do you feel that way? Because it has been quite a while where you've been hitting reset. But it just takes a right one. And maybe that's where Nebraska's headed. Hale Varsity continues, presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hale Varsity Radio.
We'll have some thoughts from Urban Meyer on Nebraska on Urban's own podcast with our friend Tim May. There's still plenty of question marks with the names that are out there. And that's, you see different polls out there. And there's still a strong Urban poll. And then there's those that are like, I can't do it again today. I can't dive into it. More thoughts from Vic when it comes to Nebraska's win total. Look, we just have no idea what Mickey can do. What we've been taught for the last 4+ years is that we're going to build up, we're going to end up 2-10, but that is why we fired Frost. If Mickey can motivate the guys, we'll see completely different results. A huge tell will be what happens against Indiana. We get smoked, find ways to fill your Saturdays so you don't end up in rehab. If we win, we can still watch some games with some hope. Very, very fair point. Emails to get to as well, chris@HaleVarsity.com. Phone lines open till 5. Evan Bland coming up, 466-3776, 800-825-5865.
And quickly here to Vic's point, what scares me is that based on what I've seen the past 4 games, simply adding motivation and leadership isn't going to be enough to save this team. That's what scares me. I mean, the leadership and the motivation can help you.
What's the true talent level like?
Yes.
Right?
Is how close are we to that true talent level right now in terms of motivation and leadership? If you're close to your true talent level, but you're just not living up to it, that can help. My question is again, that off-season development, what's been happening behind the scenes? Are these guys actually playing up pretty close to their potential right now?
I have no earthly idea.
Potential. I shouldn't say
no.
Potential.
I have no earthly idea what the potential is because you've seen recruiting rankings, right? If Nebraska's 3 top 150 offensive linemen are healthy, if Teddy's healthy, is it a different story on the offensive line? Partially, but if you're not flipping Corker into 3 different spots over a 3-year period. And Benhart, right? I mean, those are 3 dudes the rest of your own league wanted. Okay? And right now, it's not just those guys, but they're part of the struggle. So, what's up? What's going on? I don't know, man. I don't know if OU's just been right with their recruiting rankings and Nebraska's misevaluated, but I think it's just been a lot of lack of development in some regions. That's where I stand. Todd emailed in, and Todd said, what were the coaches doing before they went on the road when it comes to the week of fundamentals, right? Well, if they're going on the road, where's the fun? There's still going to be position coaches here to keep drilling. Kids aren't playing football for the first time. Pete's with us here on Hale Varsity. Pete, go ahead. Thanks for calling.
How you doing today?
Good, thanks.
I give you my opinion. I could be way off base, but I really think they need to simplify the offense. They need to go to more of a power run game, slow the game down, get out of that 10-second call a play and run it. That gives the defense some rest, and I think the defense needs to simplify and get good at something. Mm-hmm. You can't get good at 30 different defenses. You need to simplify in 2 or 3 defenses and get better at it. And if the players don't quit, I really think we're just going to slowly see marked improvement throughout the season. I don't know what the record's going to be. It all depends on how much improvement you see, but it's going to take time. You didn't go through fall camp and 3 weeks of the season and now have to stop and reverse and change everything through practice and what you're doing. That takes time, and it's going to take time, so we can't expect results immediately. But I think if they simplify, slow it down, get good at something, and simplify the defense, I think they'll get better by the end of the year.
Pete, loved the thought. Good work. And Pete's he's a regular caller, and he loves his football, man. He loves Nebraska, and he always has a good thought. Yeah, find something you're worth a damn at. Russ with us here on Hale Varsity. Russ, thanks for hanging on. Go ahead.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good. What do you know?
Well, I have to be more of an optimist. There's talent on this team. and they just haven't been coached up, and now we're going through all this turmoil. But we got 8 games left. I don't like the pessimists on the radio shows. Let Mickey let's see what Mickey can do. He's got 2 weeks to kind of get a little bit the culture in the right way. And
Russ, let me ask you this. Russ. I am the last guy in the world that wants to follow covering a 3-9 football team that turns into a 2-10 football team or a 1-11 football team. We don't cheer, but there are preferences, and the preference would be go win some ball games, right? And so I'm just throwing out there based on what you've seen eye test wise. Do you think it's possible right now to get coached up enough to get to potential bowl eligibility?
Damn right. Because as far as skill wise, I think we got in the West Division, overall talent on wide receiver and running back, we're as good as anybody, especially the wide receiver.
Don't disagree, but where do you think the lines are at, though?
Better.
Yeah.
And we need to get our defense to play like they're capable. We got some new pieces that are not playing very well right now. And let's see what the new coach is. I think Bush is going to be a big improvement. And, I'm not ready. It's one game at a time, you know. If we get blown out by Indiana or lose, then we might be looking at a 2-win season. But to say we're closer to 1-11 than the 5-7, that's a bunch of garbage. That really is. That's the worst case scenario, and I'm not throwing in the towel, and I hope the rest of the fans don't. And I'm looking forward to the game in 2 weeks. So.
Good enough, Russ. Appreciate the phone call, man. Thanks for chiming in. 466-377-6800-825-5865. Russ is like, coach him up. And, hey, you get a chance to do that with Bush and Mickey.
I respect that take. I was waiting for that phone call back in the first segment whenever I said that. I was thinking somebody was going to call in and say it, and Russ finally ripped the Band-Aid off, so thank you, Russ, for that. I'll just say...
And it was hairy part of the arm, too.
My counterpoint is Nebraska does have a lot of talent on this football team. The talent hasn't always come to the forefront. I think that falls on coaching, but what concerns me and why I say I think 1-11 might be even more realistic than 5-7 or 6-6 is because of those lines of scrimmage. Those are hard to get coached up in only 8 weeks.
Can't microwave.
No, can't microwave the lines of scrimmage. Wide receivers, maybe.
You can't microwave the lines, and you've had some guys, and to I think Babber's point too is, I mean, you guys you were counting on are no longer here, right? D-Train, Daniels, Rogers, that was supposed to be additional options on the line. Now you added, but you lost guys that knew system and scheme.
And try to get some of these guys up to speed for Big Ten play in a limited time is like trying to cook a brisket in 30 minutes.
Yeah,
it's just not going to turn out great.
And I'm not paying for that brisket. We'll wind down this first hour. It's Hail Varsity presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this hour, Evan Bland going to be with us. We'll check in with Evan from the Omaha World Herald. Also dive into alcohol sales proposed at PBA.
Ooh, baby.
For Nebraska basketball and events. I'm all good with that. City Council will have to take up booze when it comes to Haymarket and baseball, but whatever can help you get through and enjoy, right? We're presented here by Currency. For all of your equipment financing needs, got to go Currency. Also want to tell you about Red Zone tickets. Selling fun since 2001. Do you have seats? Do you have tickets you can want to use but can't? You want to sell some tickets? You want to buy some tickets to an event coming to town? How about Dave Matthews at CHI in November? Or Nebraska, Indiana, Nebraska, Wisconsin? Hey, you have the folks at Red Zone Tickets that have Husker football tickets and volleyball tickets for sale. NFL. How about some Creighton basketball, concerts, theater, seats, and, yes, CWS. Red Zone Tickets, they are local. They're located in Omaha, and they are your local source. An A-plus Better Business Bureau rating, 100% guarantee on all orders, and you'll receive authentic tickets and the experiences you'll never forget. And it's time to check off that bucket list right now. Create memories that last a lifetime. Visit RedZoneTickets.com. RedZoneTickets.com. Out of Omaha, selling fun since 2001. How fun would it be to be in New York right now, camped out in the outfield for home run number 61 and potentially number 62. Junior has been stalking Aaron Judge since he could probably walk. And he's gotten most Yankee autographs, but Jeter and, of course, Judge have been elusive.
Well, did you hear that the kids who caught his...
I saw that as a group of them.
60th home run, all about the same age as Junior, and they gave the ball back for free to the Yankees because of all Judge has done for the organization, which... Oh, yeah, that was a bad move on their part, is just what I'll say. Maybe I respect it from the fandom side of things, but also, like, hey, maybe work your way into some season tickets next season. That's not hard for the Yankees to pull off. They're the New York Yankees. And, I mean, all Judges given to the New York Yankees, like, what are you talking about? He hasn't won a World Series. He hasn't really won anything with the Yankees.
He'll get an MVP this year.
And turned down a contract extension last offseason.
But, man, was he right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was right. Good for Aaron Judge. But, like, from this kid's point of view, like, hey, get yourself some tickets. Get yourself a little meet and greet with Aaron Judge. Get yourself
a
something
signed
cool.
jersey, something, right? Todd emails in. He's wondering why they still can't tackle or have fundamental issues. He's still hung up on the fundamentals. Todd, I don't know. Maybe it wasn't emphasized or practiced as much as it should have been. And Todd's wondering if he'll run into anybody that used to be in Lincoln at the casino. And
maybe we can get into this with Evan. I wonder if it comes down to misevaluation from the coaches on the defense in terms of where they thought they were at.
It's both. I think it's misevaluation, and I think it's coaching up.
Well, I think you may have not exactly realized where this defense was, like, say, on August 1st. You didn't realize where they were. You thought they were ahead of where they were compared to what you actually saw when they hit the field against Northwestern.
You were hoping your high-priced portal additions would hit, and you wouldn't miss a beat with Wynn, with Drew, and with O'Shawn.
Maybe trying to get those guys integrated, left less time for fundamentals and more time for other things.
They're all swimming. Evan Bland on the way, hour 2.
Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Back in, it's hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency for all your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. It is that time. It's time for Evan Bland with the Omaha World Herald. Evan, what do you do during a bye week? Good to spend some time with you.
Well, like a regular bye week when things are normal, that tends to be a week where we go a little heavier on features, a little less Valentino's Pizza around Memorial Stadium. So those are all good things. This bye week, a little bit different. It's been I'm doing some stuff on the coaching search, and it's a different sort of vibe. It doesn't necessarily feel like a bye week in a lot of ways, but just not having to prepare to cover a game, to learn about an opponent this week, it's actually kind of refreshing, I'll be honest. I suppose it really isn't all that different this year, just given how things have gone.
Well, a thought on Nebraska's defense moving forward. That's the news with Chinander being relieved, and you have Coach Bush being elevated, and I'm sure you dove in a little bit here. What do you anticipate with the defense moving forward?
Well, I kind of feel like the things that we talked about Bill Bush being good for the special teams sort of translate to the defense too, where we're talking about attention to detail, we're talking about fundamentals, we're talking about a guy who can emotionally connect with his players and get them juiced and ready for a big game and a big moment. I think all those things come into play well with him. Schematically, it'll be kind of interesting to see. I mean, he's had a couple of stops in his career where he's been a defensive coordinator or a co-DC. Mickey Joseph, I thought it was interesting, made a point of mentioning at his press conference that Bill Busch had worked with Dave Aranda, defensive guru, Baylor head coach now, at 3 different stops over like a 5-year span, not all that long ago. So, Bill Busch is someone who's been around a great defensive mind, somebody who has worked with a lot of good secondaries himself over the years. So I suppose that's where it starts because, again, we're midstream, we're a third of the way through the season. I think it's probably unrealistic to expect wholesale schematic changes or changes in terminology or things like that. To me, it's more about getting back to basics and finding a guy who has a passion for getting guys back to basics, right? Gap integrity, technique, fundamentals, tackling, all the sort of things that have hurt Nebraska to this point. I think it can be a talented defensive unit, and it at times has been slow, I think, in some regard because it's been thinking things through. Early on in the season, players spoke about maybe some calls coming in late and there being some confusion, and part of that has to do with transfers and new guys playing big roles. So I think a guy like Busch has the ability and the people skills, quite honestly, to come in, maybe refocus some guys and help unlock the talent that's in there. It just hasn't been evident to this point in games.
Yeah, and Evan, it feels like a long time ago, but if I go back a couple months, the prevailing thought was that it was going to be the defense early in the season that was going to carry the load, while the offense were the ones that were catching up to the defense. And I want to get your take on that misevaluation. Do you think that's part of the reason why we're at this point in the season right now, where they have to get back to basics because those were overlooked in preseason because you saw potential talent within this defense and you just misevalued where this defense was at, say, August 1st, as opposed to where they actually were?
Yeah, to a point. I think part of it's a sort of a cautionary tale to this idea that, again, we in the media hear from coaches and players. We're not allowed to attend practice. We don't see anything ourselves. Not that I'm a talent scout or anything like that, but the point being that those expectations are built on what players and coaches have said. And I think that was part of it, right? I mean, Scott Frost, the Big Ten Media Days, offered up this idea that edge rusher might be Nebraska's best position, deepest position. And through 4 games, there just hasn't been a lot of pressure. And I think that's part of it. To me, the other part that I suppose I overvalued would be this idea of continuity in the staff. I mean, Eric Chinander's been there. He was there for 4+ years. There was stability with a lot of the position coaches back to front. And so when you have that and when you have guys who are stepping in who have been in the program for a number of years as sort of reserves or backups, special teams people, like you kind of feel like, or at least I did, that they could step in, have a pretty strong grasp of the scheme and of the terminology and what they want to do, and just sort of take the baton and run with it. But I think what we've come to find is that, maybe in some ways just how much those veteran guys from last year really were, what kind of impact they made, what JoJo Doman brought to the group, what, that secondary with Markel Dismuke and Deontay Williams did, and how valuable they were. So I think all that plays into it. And then I think you have to factor in some of the psychological stuff too. I mean, these guys before the season, they felt the pressure and they talked about wanting to play for their head coach and wanting to, make the state proud and sort of cool the hot seat talk. And, you bring all that together and it just hasn't clicked. I don't think anybody expected it to be as porous as it's been, like worst in the country type level. But unfortunately, that's where we are, and that's why there's, a lot of change going on right now in the program.
Evan Bland with us from the Omaha World-Herald talking Nebraska football. No such thing as a bye at Evan Bland, OWH. And I think to your point about, all right, next man up, you've been in the program. All right, get your feet wet and then go do your job. Well, I think we're seeing on both lines of scrimmage just how either there's been some misevaluation or lack of development, Evan, because they've struggled on the lines of scrimmage. And guys have been here or they've been forced to go to the portal, right? And that's been a bit of a mess with everyone being on the same page or at least playing free.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And, the lines of scrimmage to me is the most predictable struggle that have kind of come out of this first 4 games. I mean, you didn't get the sense, especially on the offensive line, that they addressed what they needed to address in the off season. You look around where some of the transfers have plugged in. Early on, they were all over the place except on the offensive line. And given what we knew about that group, I felt like that was sort of a warning flag that, the group kind of is what it is. There weren't maybe a ton of noticeable upgrades at that spot. And then you factor in a suspension, you factor in an injury, and it's not a good situation. And there are really no clear answers at this point, right? You can't go out and sign somebody. You can't go back to the portal right now. The guys are who the guys are. They have some depth there. I think if you wanted to look at the 6th or the 7th or the 8th guy, whoever that might be, they have bodies and players that they can plug in at that spot. I think that unit becomes even more interesting after what Mickey Joseph said this week, that Nebraska is going to slow the tempo down in an effort to protect the defense. You don't want to have your opponent getting 12, 13, 14 possessions when your defense can't stop the run. It's just not a way to win a game. And so it'll be fascinating to me to see how much they can rely on that side of the ball, that front 5 moving forward. As for the defense, I mean, they were hit hard in that sense in the portal too. When you lose, Casey Rogers, you lose Damian Daniels, you lose DeAndre Thomas. Those were all guys who could have come back this year and had eligibility remaining, and they decided not to for different reasons. And so you were starting over there outside of Ty Robinson too. You were counting on players who haven't taken a lot of meaningful snaps to do that and to do it well. You were counting on transfers from other leagues who were rotational players to step in and be the guys. And it just hasn't happened for a number of different reasons. And again, it's just not a situation that I see that you can fix in a short term. I don't know that a bye week can do that much to cure what ails Nebraska there. I think it's got to be kind of like you said, Chris, there needs to be more development. There needs to be better recruiting on those positions in particular. And I would imagine that's going to be a major priority for whoever becomes the next permanent head coach at Nebraska moving forward.
Evan, when you talk about the offense wanting to hold the ball a little bit longer during the games, really control that time of possession to keep the defense off the field, how important do you think the loss of A.J. Allen is going to be moving forward for that goal? I mean, he was a rotational piece at back, but then again, we also haven't seen many guys behind him, which I think might speak to just how much talent guys like A.J. Allen and Anthony Grant brought into the program this season at the running back position. So what do you make of that loss as it looks in terms of the entire season moving forward?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, I thought A.J. Allen looked really good in the first half Saturday. He looked like somebody who could be, a star at Nebraska in a year or two. He's quick, he was decisive, physical, and, it happens, right? That's sort of the nature of the position. And, it's funny, you think back to the conversation before the season where Nebraska has, 5, 6 scholarship guys that are sort of co-number 1s or co-number 2s or whatever you want to call it on the depth chart. And you kind of felt like that would sort itself out as it's gone along. And I think it has to some extent with Anthony Grant taking that lead back spot. But, you kind of have to acknowledge that it's a position in football where there are going to be injuries and you're going to need depth. And I think that's one position where Nebraska actually could afford an injury, not that you ever want to see it. But, Gabe Ervin's proven it in his career last season. He started a couple of games and looks good, and limited action this year too, I thought. So for him stepping in to a bigger role, I don't expect there to be too much of a drop-off for Nebraska there. And they still have depth beyond that, too, with Jacques Yant, and we still haven't seen Ramir Johnson out there. So they have other bodies that can, get this thing moving forward, too. But obviously, again, not something you want to see with Allen, and it sounds like he'll be back in the offseason. And again, I think somebody that if he stays and Nebraska can, find some stability moving forward, that he could be a star for that particular group in the future.
Evan, all right, let's talk coaching search and opening. And you have Bruce Feldman's report out that Leipold, O'Brien, Campbell are the 3. What order do you have them, or do you have your own top 3?
Yeah, I don't have any reason to doubt that report, and I think those are all very sort of common sense sort of candidates for various reasons. I've been digging into each of those guys a little bit. I'll tell you what, Lance Leopold, you look at what he's done at some of his other stops, it's really impressive. I mean, he resurrected that Buffalo program that was one of the worst in the country before he got there, that he had them in the top 25 by the time he left a couple of years ago. I mean, Kansas, the start that he's had with that team and how bad that program's been with some pretty high-profile head coaches over the years, that's something that's just got to get your attention. So the more I dig into Lance Leopold, the more impressed I am with what he's done at various stops. He has obviously some Nebraska connections too. He was on staff in the early 2000s. He was an assistant with Nebraska Omaha when they had a program in the 20-aughts, and so I think that's someone you have to look at pretty closely. Matt Campbell, obviously, his name's been linked with a lot of jobs over the years, and he was somebody who we had heard last year had Nebraska decided to make a move that he was interested in maybe making the jump to Lincoln and to the Big Ten. So you have to continue to watch him and see what he's done with Iowa State, which is another program that just doesn't have a lot of tradition since before he arrived. And then Bill O'Brien's another interesting one with what he did at Penn State and the situation that he inherited out of the Sandusky scandal. His time in the NFL, I don't know how much you can put into that because it's such a different challenge from the college game. But then what he's done with Alabama and Bryce Young over there has been really impressive too. So, whether those three end up sort of being the finalists moving forward or if there are some other candidates that emerge that we're not even talking about right now, I think all that's possible. But one thing that's certainly true about the three that we just spoke of is that they have a track record of rebuilding programs that have been down on their luck. And I think that's something that they can draw from if any of them were to step in and try to turn this thing around at Nebraska.
Evan Bland is with us here from the Omaha World-Herald. And Evan, I think I'm going to ask you what may be the most important question we're going to ask you today. Beer alcohol sales looks to be coming to Pinnacle Bank Arena and Haymarket Park here soon. So, Evan, if you're in charge of this, you get one beer. Schmidt says three.
Well, there's three candidates, right? We're just talking the three coaching candidates. I was going to give Evan. You and I were on the same page, unscripted, with this final question. Mm-hmm. What beer are you picking, or what three beers?
Let's go three. I like that.
You like the three beers? Okay, so three beers, Evan. You can pick.
Okay. Well, hey, the first one for me is easy. I'm a big Spotted Cow guy out of Wisconsin.
we will smuggle it in just for you.
I know. That's not realistic for PBA or whatnot, but yes, let's smuggle that one in. I won't turn down a Fat Tire. I think those are pretty great. And then if you're looking a little more mainstream, Coors. I think that's one that you can is a crowd pleaser more often than not.
No, that's good. Selfishly, we're going to go with Kincaid's Hail Ale, the Hail Varsity beer. So that'll be on tap. That'll be one. I think Coors is a good call. And just because I still smile about it, Guinness direct from Ireland.
People want to forget that.
Not the Guinness. That was pretty good.
Was it that much better in Ireland than it is stateside?
Oh, man, it was so good. Yes. And listen, okay. I didn't bathe in it. I mean, I paced myself. I worked. I behaved, Evan. But
sure.
It was yeah, whatever, dude. But no, it was really, really good. It was really good. Evan Bland with us, World Herald. Evan, enjoy the rest of your bye week. Air quoting that, and we'll talk next week. Thanks for a few minutes.
Thanks, guys.
Chime in 402-466-ESPN or email the show, Chris@HailVarsity.com.
Just try me.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
So Todd is still continuing the email about how bad I am at reading emails. I can't. Well, seriously, right? I'm pretty decent at reading. You gotta be through lots of extra work. You gotta be somewhat comprehensive and coherent. He's 50 today, so he's pissed off.
Well, happy birthday, first off.
Yeah, Todd. So enjoy lovely Council Bluffs and your casino trip. And just spell it out for me if I'm too lost with my reading comprehension with what you're trying to say. Just say it. They haven't been coached up to tackle. Is that what you're inferring? It's technically not supposed to be chicken scratch with email. That's how I feel trying to sift through it. But thanks for your emails. Happy 50th. I'm glad I'm not 50 yet.
You're close.
I'm a ways.
Closer to 50 than 40.
No, I'm right in that sweet spot. We're not in this 2 and 10, 6 and 6 discussion. We're not there. We need some sort of urban sounder, don't we?
Oh, that's where we're going to say this segment, Urban Meyer?
Right. I'm saying we need some sort of urban sounder because this is just the beginning. Just the beginning of Coaching Search 2022. We'll get to some of your calls here in a moment. Good stuff from Evan Bland. And we've been talking about blue blood programs that were once dominant that fell on hard times and crawled back from the gutter. Do you feel like Nebraska as a whole is teetering? And yeah, that's the answer. Because you're on to another coaching search. You're on to another set of eyeballs nationally, and you've got Trev to do the heavy lifting here with picking the right guy. And the next guy is going to need the original timeline that Scott was promised. So, because Scott didn't get it done. And you're really behind now. Since 2014, you're going to be on a fourth coach. Fifth if you want to count interim. Was that pleasant, or are you just doing me a solid? Phone call.
Oh, it was Pete on the line. He didn't want to go on the air.
Okay.
Not today.
Okay.
If the conversation comes there, we'll get to what Pete had to bring up, but we'll see where the conversation takes us.
Where we were going is the reality of not too far gone as a program, right? And you're running out of swings. And I'll say this, between Frank and Bo, they left their successors, guys on second and third with less than 2 out. I'll say that Callahan left Bo, bases loaded, no out. When you look at the talent that got coached up, the Sues, right, the Hags, the Princes, there were some dudes on both lines of scrimmage, right? They just fell short with Callahan and Cosgrove. But right now, what has followed Riley and now Frost, I mean, whoever comes into this program is coming into a place that's had a bomb go off with what's in the cupboard or what's been developed, okay? We know there's some groceries. Can you make a great meal or have things expired? That's what is on the line here for 2023, 2024, and how much further in the back of the line in the Big Ten do you get? With everyone else continuing to get loads of money, you have NIL, you have new facility to pimp, you have a really smart athletic director. Great. How do you stay in the chow line so you're not last?
To me, it comes down to getting it right, and I think there's been a lot of talk with the next hire, and that's where I was going to say is getting it right with the next hire, because it does feel do or die. But as long as you have fans who are willing to support the team through NIL, fans who are willing to go fill up Memorial Stadium on Saturday, fans who are willing to go pay for that new $120 million facility, as long as you have fans that are willing to that, I don't think Nebraska's ever too far gone to make the return. We've seen it from the likes of Alabama. Alabama seemed dead in the water until they got a guy, Nick Saban, who's built that program up to something incredible. You can say the same for Oklahoma through much of the 90s before Bob Stoops came to town, where Oklahoma looked a little bit dead in the water with their program. And I don't think anyone ever thought that they were too far gone. And the difference with Nebraska is the way in which they have gone about losing games over the past, say, 6 years, where they just do look physically outmatched in most aspects of the game, where I think people have this recency bias. They look at what Nebraska looks like recently, and they say, well, Nebraska's obviously too far gone to make a comeback. But as long as you have fans that are willing to put their money where their mouth is in terms of their fan support for this university and for this state, I don't think Nebraska's ever going to be too far gone. But this next hire is huge because I can see some of that starting to go by the wayside if you don't get this next hire right.
Right. And no, you nailed it. And you still have the resources. You don't want those resources to dry up because you've quit on support. And it's interesting, too, with Nebraska, how they'll navigate. And I think you got to have the right people in charge to go get the right dudes. And listen, it's about compliments, and the compliment is to get look at it like you did for JUCO, okay? Go get a Terrell Farley that's incredible to an already awesome defense, okay? But don't ever be in the position again to be relying on guys that are too young to start or not ready on your lines of scrimmage. And have alternative options if you missed or a kid didn't get coached up in his first 3 years here. It's weird. But we talk about physical and being mismatched. Nebraska wasn't a year ago. They weren't pushed around on the lines of scrimmage. They're getting pushed around now. They're getting destroyed now. They weren't last year on the defensive side of the ball, and that was super senior guys that have been part of the program for an extended time.
And look how much better that made the defense look as a whole. I don't think it's a stretch to say, it's a little out there, but if you were to take, say, a 2012, 2013 Nebraska offensive line and Nebraska defensive line and replace the guys they got on the team right now, I don't think it's a stretch to say this team could realistically go out and compete for the West this season. The West seems wide open.
Yes.
And it really falls down the offensive line because the problem with the offense is not Casey Thompson. It's not Anthony Grant at running back. It's not the receivers. They've shown the ability that they can make it work. It's the tackles, and really let's just put the whole offensive line in there. No one, not a single guy on the offensive line. Like last season, you had Cam Jurgens where I went, well, the offensive line isn't very good, but
Cam made up for a lot.
They don't have that guy this season to say, well, at least they got this one guy. So I'm not willing to put it just on the tackles. I'm going to put it on the entire offensive line. And I can say the same for the defensive line because I don't think that back seven is all that much worse than the back seven that this Husker defense had last season. What the big difference is the strength and the quality of the guys you have on that defensive line. I guess I could call it the front four because it's not all defensive linemen, but you get what I'm saying. That's the difference in this team. And I think this team would look so much different if it wasn't for the guys up front on both sides of the football.
That's exactly it.
And that's why I don't think this program is too far gone, because some people are saying doom and gloom. Well, it's going to take 4 years for Nebraska to get back to a bowl game based on what this team looks like right now. Realistically, if you have a coach in here that can build up an offensive and defensive line, which any college
that's coach, your next hire, whoever it is, has got to do.
And they have to keep the positions elsewhere looking good, but realistically, 2 or 3 seasons is not an unrealistic ask in terms of building up an offensive line.
No, be competent enough to limp into a bowl game at 6-6. Okay, let's get to Urban Meyer, his podcast with Tim May. Urban sounded off a little bit, was asked directly about mid-season firings.
I just think it's intriguing, and the intriguing part is that I want to say from 2012 to from 2002 to 2012, there was only like three coaches fired mid-season. The next decade, there's 35. So you have to ask yourself, what changed? What changed was the amount of money that, whether it be donors, whether it be television contracts, it seems like buyouts don't matter, even though the contracts for coaches have escalated so high. So number one, you saw it in Nebraska. If they waited a couple more weeks, buyout would have went down a little bit. And they said they had to make a change before the bye week, I guess. The second thing, Tim, is that early signing day changed the world. I'm not sure people really realize the significance of it.
Oh, yeah.
December signing day. And it's something I think it's 85% or 90% of players are signed at. So you have to have, in the perfect world, they hire a coach and he's putting together his staff. A little bit like when I was hired at Ohio State, I was able to put that staff together, but signing date wasn't until February. So there wasn't the panic.
Yeah.
The problem is, so far away, we got Nebraska and Arizona State. There's a panic right now.
Urban on returning to coaching.
No, I'm really happy at Fox. I'm really happy with lifestyle right now, and I'm flying in today to see grandkids, and I'm happy with what I'm doing.
Okay, so he's happy right now. Last thought, Urban on Lance Leipold.
I just have always respected the guys that have won at all levels. This is not Luke that he's winning. And Kansas is. I've always thought Kansas. You ever go to Lawrence, Kansas? Is beautiful.
Yeah.
I just never understand why. Glenn Mason had it going for a while, and Mangino had him in the Rose Bowl or Orange Bowl. So I've never understood why you get that dark cloud over a place. So the fact he should be on people's short list. That's not a risk. He might not be a big sexy name or something like that, but that's, in my opinion, when I started doing my research on him and reading about him, I never met him, but the guy's a winner.
Yeah,
and that's all you can say about it.
So a little bit of Urban's podcast with Tim May. Yeah, not a risk, Lance Leipold. It's going through some of KU's coaching staff as well. They go back. Some of those guys go back to UNO with him. So just figure out what would be available if Nebraska goes that direction. But Mickey's still here. Mickey on the road recruiting. A Jock Doc's on the way. It's Hail Varsity. We're presented by Currency.
He's in his 30s, but sounds like he was born with a stogie in one hand and a brew in the other.
Now, say my name.
It's Schmitty on Hail Varsity Radio.
I got the body of a taut, preteen Swedish boy.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity Radio. Time for a Jock Doc Wednesday, Nebraska Orthopedic Center. We say hi to Dr. Doug Toewes. Dr. Doug, how's fantasy going?
Well, we're not playing it this year, Chris.
Oh, man.
Hard to believe, and it's been too long since I've been on the line with you that you didn't know that I was out of the fantasy world.
Well, it is, and one of the more exciting quarterbacks was Trey Lance, right? North Dakota State product, really talented kid, and the heir apparent for a team that's not far removed, the Niners, from a Super Bowl. And you've had a lot of injuries in the NFL because it always happens, but pretty gruesome one with Trey Lance. Let's talk about Trey and his ankle, Dr. Doug.
Yeah, so, when you see the replay on this one, it just looks like his ankle buckles out, from under him. And he gets a pretty good pop, but it was really more the foot contact with the ground and the body weight, shifting over the top of it, which, we're so used to talking about with a lot of these injuries, whether it's knee or ankle or whatever. But so he broke the fibular bone, which is that bone on the outer aspect of the ankle, and then also had a ligament injury. And so both of those areas needed to be addressed surgically. And just as a basic thought process for ankle fractures, pretty much any time where we have a combination of a fracture and a ligament injury, there's going to be surgery involved. Sometimes with ankle fractures, if the ligament injury isn't there and it's just the fracture, we can treat it non-operatively, but not when the ligament injury is involved.
Dr. Doug, one thing I noticed from watching the play happen was that Trey Lance initially didn't notice his ankle was broken. He tried to stand up and he didn't quite realize something was wrong until he tried to put weight on it. So in the heat of the moment during a game, the adrenaline's pumping. A, how common is that? And B, can you cause any more damage to your ankle or whatever you injure if you try to do that?
Yeah, so it's common. It is amazing what an adrenaline, rush will do for somebody. But one of the things with ankle fractures is that the
there's just this reflex of, getting off of it immediately, when you've got a broken ankle, and especially one with a ligament injury that realistically, he couldn't have taken really any steps, and it just is one of those things where very quickly that you can't really try and do anything on that. Now, without the ligament injury, I've seen people try and push through the pain of a fracture, but with the ligament injury, the ankle becomes unstable, and you really just can't go through that.
Dr. Doug Toewes with us, Nebraska Orthopedic Center, a Jock Doc Wednesday. Trey Lance, our topic, as a broken ankle and ligament disruption. Dr. Doug, when it comes to the surgery you're familiar with, how difficult a surgery is it? And I ask that because I look at the flip around here that they think, air quote being some folks in the NFL, he can be healed 10 to 12 weeks and still be back maybe towards the end of the season.
Yeah, so the wild card here is the ligament piece. The fractured fibula, again, that's that bump on the outside of the ankle, if you want to say it that way. That bone heals up pretty quick. You get in there and put the plate and screws on it, and you can get that thing healed up pretty well in a 6-8 week time frame. Obviously, it takes a little longer than that for them to get back into any kind of playing shape, but the bone can get healed. The ligament, unfortunately, is a longer issue, and the 12-week kind of time frame. I would say 10 weeks is, I think, is just too optimistic. 12-week is maybe a possibility. But the problem with the ligaments is that it's difficult to do a direct repair of those. So what you're really doing in most situations like this is you're holding the ankle in a position where the ligaments have a chance to heal up, but it's really just the body healing itself once the bones are positioned correctly and the ligaments get a chance to heal up. So there's the ligament between the two bones of your leg bone. It's called the syndesmotic ligament, and that ligament, when it is damaged, we don't go in between the two bones and try and sew that together. What we do is we put a fixation device across the bones and squeeze the bones together so that ligament will have a chance to heal. That's what takes the length of time to heal up. So he might come back, but I wouldn't be overly optimistic for this year.
What can you do to those ligaments to get them firing again? I mean, there's the healing process, the surgical work, but then when it comes to the recovery aspect, the rehab, what's the best medicine?
Yeah, so when the ligaments get damaged, that's when we will frequently end up with kind of a stiffer joint. So again, if it's just the bone that we had to treat, we can put stable enough fixation on that to where we can actually begin early motion with an ankle, for instance. But when the ligaments are involved, we just have to let that sucker sit there and heal without moving it, and then we have to fight the stiffness that's there that comes on from the immobilization. And so what really is going on here is trying to work our way through that stiffness, and that is primarily proprioceptive work. It's trying to retrain the ankle, where it is in space. Like when you're trying to push off the ankle, your brain doesn't think about, okay, my foot is in this position. It just kind of happens, and that's that proprioceptive sense. And that's what they'll work on in rehab. They'll work on giving him back that proprioceptive ability to understand where his leg is in space so that he can do the things he does as an athlete.
Dr. Doug Toewes with us, Nebraska Orthopedic Center, a Jock Doc Wednesday. Trey Lance is our topic, talented rookie quarterback, as he's waited his time and got a nod and busted his ankle. It's now Jimmy G back. This is a movie, Dr. Doug, is what it is. But we'll see how things move forward here. Does it matter to you, real quick, Dr. Doug, if it's his plant ankle or the left ankle when he's following through with his throw in the pocket?
Yeah, and it really doesn't make any difference from a treatment perspective, but
stability.
The stability and the push off. The push off piece can make a difference, obviously, for somebody in a throwing motion, and that is going to be influenced by how stiff this ankle is, and again, how well does he get a sense of how that ankle is positioned when he is trying to load it. So it can make a difference, yeah.
Dr. Doug, we'll get caught up next week. Thanks for a few minutes today.
You bet. You guys have a good day.
Miss us?
Come here, brother. Give me a hug. Bring it in for the real thing.
We're on call for you. Catch the podcast at HailVarsity.com, the ESPN Lincoln app, or download them on iTunes.
Saddle up, partner.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time, midweek edition, Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Also, buckle up. Using your seatbelt saves lives and prevents injuries if properly worn. This message presented to you by the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. We are 2 days away from a Friday road show up at the Hail Varsity Club in La Vista. We want to see you up there ahead of high school football on Friday. Good ball games in the Metro. I've got a ball game tomorrow night here locally over on sister station KFOR, Millard North, and their option attack against Lincoln Southeast. So that's going to be a ton of fun. 8 o'clock kick tomorrow night there, Seacrest. So I get the chance to see Millard North, really storied program. Same with Southeast. You know that. Elijah playing ball for the Knights like you did. And we are pretty happy with today's show. We'll be better tomorrow, though, because we got Gary Barnett, Bill Bender, Brandon Vogel, and a sit-down with Danny Burke, because there's all sorts of betting that can and will be done.
And if I do end up in Council Bluffs on Saturday, I need to know.
Are you going to just hunker down at the sports book?
We'll see.
Really?
I got nothing else planned on my Saturday. So that might be a good look. It's just
go lose a paycheck or go win a paycheck.
Win a paycheck based on what we hear from Danny Burke tomorrow. I got to know if I'm crazy for wanting to hammer Florida to cover 10.5 against Tennessee.
That's a monster number.
It's a big number for a rivalry game like that, and it's in Knoxville, so.
But that has never really phased Florida.
But this Tennessee team this year does look different.
T. Martin, no, they're good, but Florida crap. Kentucky's good. Kentucky's a good football. Kentucky's probably the third best, fourth best team in the SEC. Fair? Like, you got Ole Miss there. You've got Bama. Okay.
Bama, Georgia.
Yeah, Bama, Georgia, and then I think Kentucky's right there. I think Mississippi State's pretty decent, but they're not. I think Ole Miss is probably third. But who's to say? I don't know. I don't know the crossover schedule if Kentucky plays Ole Miss this year or not.
But then it's probably that.
And then there's LSU.
Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi State, all kind of in that somewhere 4 through 6 range, 4 through 8, somewhere in there. So
it's loaded.
Kentucky's a good team.
Kentucky could be an 11-win team. For them to go win, and I think Utah's a good football team. So for Florida's good. They just weren't good enough to beat Kentucky.
10.5 just seems a little.
That seems nasty.
High
in that rivalry, doesn't it?
So we'll get Danny Burke's take on that tomorrow.
Big thanks to Mike Babcock, Evan Bland. Great to spend time with them, and just kind of talk about where you're at here on the spectrum of optimism or pessimism with the FPI win total that's now projected. And we heard from a lot of folks. They're optimistic that the kids will get coached up, and I don't think it's going to be for a lack of effort with the kids getting coached up by Mickey and the crew. But where can they go, and what can the season still be with 8 games left? Also heard from Urban Meyer, and he's happy at Fox for this week, for now. Join us tomorrow. Find the podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play for Hail Varsity Radio. Give us a rating, good, bad, ugly, or watch us. Do so on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. For Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt, talk to you tomorrow at 4 on Hail Varsity.